We have so there's one question that I like in particular because I'm a scientist. I like being at the bench, and someone has asked us, asked Dr. Purpose in particular, is it possible to combine scientific research with technology transfer, i.e., doing both at the same time?
Oh, goodness. Uh, actually not really, and be good at both. You know, sometimes people think that if they leave the bench and go into a job where you wear suits a lot, that you don't necessarily have to work as hard or work as long of hours. And that's not the case. In many respects, you'll be working harder than you ever did before. Um, there aren't enough hours in the day, I think, to successfully run a lab and to be a successful technology transfer person. I think it would be extraordinarily difficult. If you didn't want to sleep or have a life, you might be able to swing it, but otherwise, probably not.
Well, speaking of not sleeping and having a life, here's another question for both of you. Could you please discuss a little a little further, the work-life balance associated with some of the careers that you've mentioned?
Kate, you
I'll
want to say
start
that?
this one. Yeah. Well, it's incredibly difficult to achieve work-life balance when you're a working professional who also has small children, okay? And a lot of us say that you can be a great lawyer and a great mom, but you can't be both at the same time. So what you have to learn how to do very early on is set your priorities. You know, you have to service your clients, but also service your family. And there are days when I work a full day, I go home, I enjoy dinner with the kids, and then when they're in bed at 9 o'clock, I go back to work. And I'm hitting send to the patent office at 11:45 because I have till midnight to file that paper. It's difficult. You can do it, and you have to be able to say no. And that's a very hard word for us people pleasing type A personalities, but you can do it, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think, to Kate's point, it is very, very difficult. Um, Generally, though, tech transfer folks, if we're working on a deadline, it's usually because we've punted something over to the people like Kate, to the patent attorneys who do the filings at 11:45 on our institution's behalf. Having said that, it's common to go home at the end of the day at a reasonable hour, but then have dinner, talk to your family, wave to them as you're walking to your study, and get online and start working again, doing emails, reviewing contracts, any number of things. So it is a difficult balance that I think a lot of us, we are scientists or former scientists, and there are certain personality traits that we have that make it hard for us to let go of things. And you have to find ways to do that and consciously make a decision to find a balance. You're never going to be completely finished with any project. And again, that's another one of those traits. If you can't deal with that, then you probably would not be happy in our world.
Never going to be completely finished with any project. I think that's good advice for raising children as well. I think I'm
You'll
most
notice I
impressed with
didn't
your
say life lesson. I didn't wasn't specific on that one.
I'm most impressed with your ability to get your kids to bed by 9. I don't know how you do that. Um, here's a question that I think is coming in from a lot of people, which is, and so I'm just going to phrase it in a general way. A lot of people are writing in and saying that they're current PhD students who are now thinking that they might want to go into either being a patent attorney or working in tech transfer after their PhD. And so a lot of people are asking variants on a question of what can I do during my PhD that might give me an edge to enter this field once I complete my degree.
Well, if you want to be a patent lawyer or a patent agent, you can sit for the patent bar while doing your PhD. All you need is 30 credits of a science or an engineering, so you have that because you're obtaining your PhD, so you more than likely got that with your bachelor's and or your master's degree. So you could actually go to the USPTO.gov website, download the materials you need to sit for the bar exam, because patent attorneys have to sit for 2 bars. We sit for our state bars. You know, I'm qualified in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I went to a New Jersey law school. My firm is in Pennsylvania. But then we have to either before or after sit for our patent bar. That makes us very special lawyers, which is why we're still highly employable. So you can certainly do that while you're doing your PhD research, and indeed, it would give you an indication as to whether or not you think you can practice patent law for the next couple of decades, because I find it very interesting and some days exciting, but it's a very difficult job every day. You have to think hard every day and type a lot every day. Okay, so I like to say sometimes it's like having a take-home exam every day of your life. And if that doesn't appeal, you might not want to be doing this. And I think sitting for the patent bar will give you a clue as to how the layer of law sits on top of your science while doing this job.
I would say something similar. I think you may not believe me, but your time in graduate school, you'll have more spare time then than at any other time in your career. And so to the extent that you can leverage that and study, learn business, learn some law, you know the science presumably, talk to your tech transfer offices, see if they will allow you to volunteer or sit in on meetings or different things like that. Start your networking tree that way. So those are things that you can do. If you are debating as to whether or not to stay in a PhD program, I would encourage you to do so. The experience and the knowledge is invaluable, and the depth of the understanding of the science is invaluable. If you are thinking of leaving your PhD, anyway, go get an MBA. Do something like that, and that would prepare you well for a career in tech transfer.
Great. So we've talked about careers in law as a second career simultaneous with your science career, which sounds more than a little daunting. And we've talked about what to do to prepare for a law career. What about, so someone has asked here, is it possible to do technology transfer part-time? Or is part-time work a possibility for a patent agent?
For tech transfer, some offices may employ some part-time people, or but it's generally a full-time job or full-time position. It just depends on the needs of a given program.
When you're in a law firm, it can vary. So, for example, our firm has a certain hourly requirements for attorneys, but they have lower hourly requirements for folks who go to law school at night while working for us during the day. That's how I became a lawyer. So full-time job, law school at night. Separates the men from the boys, okay? But another avenue to pursue if you wanted to work part-time in this field there are contract agencies like Kelly Law, for example, you can sign up with those agencies and they can sort of hire you out as a contracting attorney or patent agent, where they find the projects for you and you do them as your schedule permits, or you work as much as you like. Typically, the law firm is all about, we want every hour of your life billed. And so it's more difficult to get part-time positions. But if you're very, very good at what you do and there is a surplus of work, yeah, I can see people getting hired for a 3-day work week, for example. Again, you would get lower pay because everything is judged by how many hours you put in. But you can find them. They're not as plentiful as you would think, but you can find them.
So here's something that we also haven't really discussed too much yet. This question, I think, is for Ellen. So what are the different advantages and disadvantages of working in tech transfer in industry versus academia?
That's a great question. You'll make more money in industry. I'll start off by saying what I like about academia. Although it's very intense and very fast-paced, it's still a more relaxed atmosphere, I should say an informal atmosphere, as opposed to business, where business folks tend to be a lot more formal in how they have to behave. In business, you will travel a lot, and if you're not really, if you don't like that, you would not be comfortable. In business, it's always about the bottom line, and will this particular technology eventually make money for the company? And that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's why businesses exist. But that's really the whole reason for doing the job. In academia, we're a little bit different than that. So, for example, my institution, our mission is to improve the health of children. Now, that can be through technology transfer and licensing and bringing in revenues to do more research. It can also be accomplished maybe with doing arrangements that don't make as much money or don't bring in the revenues to the institution. So it's a little bit less bottom line driven. The resources are different. In academia, we are generally not able to go out and purchase the $25,000 a year database subscriptions that companies do all the time. So it becomes a bit of an information gap, and you learn how to use your business library at your institution very well. So there are resources and formality and those kinds of things.
So we have touched briefly on salary in a comparative sense, but we have someone who went ahead and asked, and so without divulging any personal information, because I'm curious about this too. So what are the typical salary ranges for a patent agent or for somebody working in tech transfer? Feel free to be as vague or as specific as you wish.
Kate, you go for it.
Well, first of all, your patent law salary will depend on what part of the country you're in, what technology you're practicing. So sometimes, for example, mechanical engineers, the device guys, the shovel guys, will make less money an hour than myself, for example, with my PhD in microbiology and molecular genetics. So if I just talk about the Northeast, patent agents can typically command, an hourly rate of between, it can be as low as $75 an hour, but it can be as high for a patent agent as $350 an hour, and that's just ballparking, okay? So I know patent attorneys such as myself can bill, my colleagues and my counterparts bill anywhere between, I want to say, $375 an hour and $560, $600 an hour. What I like to say is when I was an NIH postdoc, I made X, and when I became a patent lawyer, I made 10X. Which is very sad when you consider I was trying to cure cancer and HIV, and that wasn't valued hardly at all. And then let me tell you, my graduate advisor was horrified when I said I'm going to go be a patent lawyer. But I will tell you, they will pay you for that.
Yeah, in tech transfer, now and on the academic side, the salaries are certainly not what they are for patent attorneys for the most part. Again, there's a huge range depending on your level of experience, your geographic location, your position in the office food chain, and that sort of thing. Starting a brand new, fresh out of postdoc, starting licensing associate in this region, in the Northeast region, would be anywhere probably from the mid-70s to maybe 90-ish. Now, then as you go through your career, then it can go up, to a very nice, hefty salary. But you have to be a director or above to actually be commanding, more in the six-figure range.
Six-figure salaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you both for candidly answering that. We actually, strangely enough, we don't ask that question during most of these webinars, even though I think it's sort of in the back of everyone's minds. So you talked about, exactly. Some people need to eat $600 an hour's worth, apparently. I'm quitting my job right now, and I'm going to become a patent attorney. So actually, you mentioned outside the Northeast, things like that. Someone has asked a very good question here. Are there many patent law opportunities outside of large U.S. cities?
It's harder. I have a friend who is down in Arkansas, and he's a veterinarian who crossed over to the dark side. And he has a hard time because there's one med school, one vet school, not that much biotech industry, so he's having a very hard time generating a client base. However, on the flip side of that, it's a tiny little globe now, between email, FaceTime, webinar time, whatever you want to call it, you can seek your clients across the country. You just have to be, one thing I didn't mention is in order to be in private practice, you also have to be a salesperson, okay? A marketing person. You have to sell your services. That doesn't come easy to many scientists, but my practice is in Philadelphia, and I represent clients in Oregon, Texas, Indiana, upstate New York, New York City. I've worked for folks in Georgia. I have Florida. You just have to build your base, and you build your base by finding your clients wherever they are. It is harder, though, if you're in a less populated state, but not impossible.
So actually, someone has asked the flip side of that question, which is, are there preferred geographic locations for patent attorneys to practice? San Francisco, Boston, places like that. What are some of the big biotech hubs, and does that equate to more jobs?
Absolutely. So as you just said, California, the technological corridor there, very big. Boston, New York City, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, the research triangle down there, very bustling area. St. Louis has Monsanto. A lot of the plant-based jobs would be there. Wherever there's a big med center, Cleveland would have some pretty good patent law jobs. That's where you want to go. Where is the science and technology concentrated? And that's where you'll find the need. But I know folks who are working quite well and lucratively in Nebraska. It just depends on if you're good and you can market your services.
So we have a question that's come in via Twitter, which excites us because it makes us feel very technological. So the question is for Dr. Rigaud, is a career in your field possible with a master's, either as a patent agent or a patent attorney, just a master's, no PhD?
I have many friends who have just masters or even just bachelors. In my practice, I have some difficulty with that because we do very high-level advanced recombinant DNA-based patent applications. But certainly, if you're a very well-versed chemist, again, that's biotech. I think it depends on your art area, but and also your intellect. You don't have to have a PhD to understand molecular biology. You just have to understand it. So you have to love science, and certainly you can go very far with a master's degree, and I know many people who have, as does Ellen.
And I know many people with PhDs who do not understand molecular biology very well.
They work at the
or
patent
can
office.
get their way out of a paper bag.
So one thing we haven't talked about yet that someone submitted a question about is doing a postdoc. So a typical question in a webinar like this would be, do I need a postdoc? And the answer here obviously is no. But does it help to have done a postdoc? Does it hurt to have done a postdoc?
It certainly does not hurt. And that's actually a really good question, because I've found in my career that the folks that I've worked with, or the folks that I've hired who did postdocs versus those who didn't, seem to have a greater depth of understanding of science in general and of how research works. It's remarkable how even if you only do one postdoc that's 2 years, it's remarkable how much kind of passive learning that you do regarding how science in general works and just regarding the science itself. So I would encourage people to get postdocs.
I would agree with Ellen. I postdoced for 3 years, and I would say that because my training ranged from markers associated with pancreatic cancer progression, different stages of a viral life cycle, then on to immunotoxins, I was exposed to many different areas of science, which as a patent attorney has served me in very good stead. Because I don't know if today I'm doing a transgenic plant, a new coagulation factor, or a method for curing arterial injury. It could be any of those things on any given day. So the more science knowledge you accumulate on the way to your job in patent law, the better off you'll be.
So we've talked a lot about jobs in the job sense, but we've got a question here. What about in the consulting sense? So let's say somebody wants to, rather than being a full-time, all-out patent attorney or something like that, to do technology transfer consulting or legal consulting. Does something like that exist, and how would someone go about looking into that?
It does exist, more for people who are very seasoned and have a lot of experience in the field. Someone who's never done tech transfer trying to become a consultant, they're going to have a tough time because they're not going to be in a structured environment where they can actually get the kinds of experience and exposures that are necessary. Now, on the other hand, there are the companies like the McKinseys of the world, or there are the on Wall Street and consulting for on the science itself for financial institutions and things of that sort. That's doable, but again, your level of experience is going to have a huge impact on your ability to get the positions and the salary that you'll be able to command.
In my experience, many of my university clients do hire consultants, but they're typically, as Ellen just alluded to, seasoned veterans from industry who have stepped away from their industrial jobs and they just want to keep their hand in commercialization. It would be rare for somebody to be fresh out of grad school or postdocing to come in as a consultant unless they were the leading expert in their field of research and you had a commercial partner who was interested in picking your brain.
Okay. So this is a very specific question, but it's one that I think might benefit a lot of people attending this webinar. Would you recommend those who'd like to become patent attorneys to pursue a master's in intellectual property? There are a lot of online programs, online master's degrees in things like intellectual property that you could complete during your postdoc, during your PhD. What do you think about the online masters in intellectual property?
I tried to explain earlier about the 3-year learning curve in intellectual property. When my new people come in, I tell them it's like the elephant and the 6 blind men. Is it a tree? Is it a snake? Is it a wall? What is it? And it takes about 3 years before you figure out that it's an elephant. Well, I think that you could get some good knowledge out of a master's in IP. You'd be better served to sit for the patent bar and get yourself a reg number, I think would be a more lucrative and productive path to pursue, because once you have your reg number, clients or corporations or universities are more likely, or firms indeed, would be more likely to hire you because you've shown real application of patent law to get that number. I don't know, and I would also probably imagine that many of these masters in IP programs are all over the map vis-a-vis the caliber of what you're actually learning. So I'm not sure if I would recommend a master's in IP. What do you think about that, Ellen, as a client?
Frankly, I would look at the individual's other qualifications, and I think it might be of limited value as well, at least with regard to the actual practice of patent law, as a mechanism for gaining the basic knowledge needed to understand IP, either for tech transfer or for patent law. It might be a good route to take, but I don't know that it would help you that much career-wise.
Okay. We have time for just one more question, and it's something that was alluded to briefly, which is how to tell your PI from grad school that you have decided to switch to being a lawyer. So someone actually asked that question here, and we'll just read it verbatim. What advice would you give for a scientist wanting to transition to a career in science policy or technology transfer? Especially, how might a scientist explain this career change to colleagues?
My boss thought it was the most boring thing I could possibly do with my time. He said, "You're going to be a what? A patent lawyer? That sounds horrible." But actually, the first 2 patents I wrote were at a Fox Chase Cancer Center. One was on an enzyme from celery that recognized all mismatches in DNA so that you could do some genetic testing for DNA damage. And that was licensed and made some good dollars. And another one I did was a gene that was very important called HEF1 on B cell signaling, and it was very important for cancer. And I will tell you, it was so exciting to actually work on good science. The best thing about a patent lawyer is, you're having the eureka moment. They don't call the patent lawyer when the experiment didn't work again or the control ruined your whole day. They call you when they say, voila, we have something that is amazing and we want to spend a lot of money to try and commercialize it. That's exciting. So once John Leonard was my graduate advisor, once I disabused him of his notion that this would be desperately boring and explained to him about the caliber of the science I was working on, things that were publishing in Science and Nature magazine, no footnote, patent by Kate, but still, no, you tell them that actually it's a very exciting career, never boring, because you only get the best, top-notch, best caliber science to work on.
Yeah, the whole conversation has evolved a lot since I've had it with my postdoc advisor. Is that there used to be a wide divide between academia, the so-called ivory tower, and the commercial sector. Kate jokingly calls the commercial sector or the patent law sector the dark side. I think it's just a side, but. And there are a lot of folks, or a lot of faculty people who still think that if you're getting a PhD and you're going to do a postdoc or whatever, you're doing that for an academic career. And they may not be all that positive about your wanting to make the change. Sometimes they take it personally. What, did I drive you from science? Those kinds of things. So you have to tread lightly, depending, and again, it's very personality driven. And this is where your people skills come in and your diplomacy comes in, because you'll phrase it differently depending on the advisor. My postdoc advisor actually was pretty supportive when I broke the news, if you will, and explained what tech transfer was, which that's almost impossible to do in a single sentence. So anymore, people are around patents more. They know more about this whole realm, and they're going to be more receptive and more positive, I think. Plus the reality that there really aren't that many academic jobs out there for faculty. So I think that the conversation has evolved quite a bit.
Very true, and I have friends who've left after getting their PhDs to go into law, and I always I'm the one who stayed with the PhD and stayed in science, and I always wondered how they could justify doing that, how they found that possibly interesting. But what you both said is the same thing that they say they find most interesting, the fact that you get sort of an inside track to reading about everybody's eureka moments and everybody's greatest, most interesting discoveries, and actually getting to help with all the best science in the country.